Conference. My name is Erica Rowe, and I am from the Partnership for Children of Essex. I will be your host during the session called Working Together to Prepare Students for Success in Employment. And I'm joined by the panelists, Bill Freeman from the Department of Education and Toni Scott from the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. So we want to thank our panelists for being here. Just a few housekeeping before we get started. We encourage you to rename your Zoom if you haven't done so already, just so that we know who is in the room with us. It helps everyone to get a sense of who's participating within the session. In this format, all participants are muted by default. So if you would like to communicate with myself or any of the panelists, that we just ask that you use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the screen, and hopefully everyone can see that. A recording of these presentations will be available within the next few days on the website, www.njutransitionlife. And this session is also being closed captioned. In order to activate the closed caption feature, you must click on the live transcript button on the bottom of the screen window and click show subtitle. You need that. Also, if you need technology support at any point during the conference, you can access the live tech support Zoom room sponsored by Richard West from ATAC. The Zoom room link is available on our website on the conference agenda page, but just please be patient as there may be many people trying to seek help at the same time. So we just ask that you be patient. A quick fix may be for you to sign in, sign out, and then sign back in. That may, fix things for you if you're experiencing any problems. Please note that we have a very hard stop 5 minutes prior at the next hour in order for us to host the next presentation. Okay, so I will hand over to our presenters. Mr. Bill Freeman, you have the floor. And Ms. Toni Scott.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Bill Freeman from the New Jersey Department of Education, and I'm joined today by...
Hi, I am Toni Scott. I'm with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services under Department of Labor and Workforce Development.
Unfortunately, our third partner in this project, Amanda Gerson, just fell ill today. We're very sorry to hear that, and so she could not join us. So Toni and I will guide you through this presentation that does involve 3 different agencies, although Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, Amanda Gerson, is not going to be present. We will still represent her and her content. Okay, so this afternoon, for the next slightly less than an hour together, we're going to talk about how we work together through an interagency agreement and just what is the purpose of this interagency agreement between our 3 agencies. We'll talk about 3 different types of services that are available for students. And these are services that are relatively new. They've only been around for a few years. And so it's an interesting change for everyone in education. We'll talk about how to obtain services. What's the referral process look like for students and schools to obtain these services? What is the role of school staff in facilitating and providing services for students? And we'll go over the role of state agency staff to implement this agreement. All right, so the purpose of the interagency agreement, first off, everyone should understand that the federal law known as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and we're going to talk more about that, but that law requires that every state in our nation must have an interagency agreement between the education agency, which is the Department of Education, and the VR agencies, or Voc Rehab, which are in New Jersey, the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. So, consistent with that requirement from the federal law, we have in New Jersey an interagency agreement that is designed to facilitate and coordinate the services that are needed by students with disabilities to successfully transition from school to employment and other post-secondary activities leading to employment. And the three services that we're going to talk about are pre-employment transition services, or Pre-ETS, vocational rehabilitation, or VR services, and VR, or vocational rehabilitation transition services.
Mhm.
All right, Toni, you want to take this over?
Sure. So the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act of 2014, which you'll hear us throughout the presentation refer to as WIOA, this amended the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it's one of four major parts of the workforce system. The main focus that we're going to really talk about today is on exploring and developing more career pathways for sustaining employment in a competitive integrated setting. There's a focus on employer engagement and also an expansion of supported employment services.
Okay, so our content as far as this federal law for today really focuses on the provision of services to students and youth with disabilities. So that's one piece of this larger federal law.
So this is the definition of competitive integrated employment. It could be in a full-time or part-time role. They must be compensated at minimum wage or more, which currently right now in New Jersey is $12 an hour. They must be eligible to receive the same type of benefit and opportunity for promotions and advancement as any other employee. And they might be working in an environment where they're interacting with coworkers who may or may not be individuals with disabilities.
And it's also interesting, the definition includes the idea that not only are individuals paid at least minimum wage, but they also must be paid the customary pay rate. In other words, if employers are paying somebody else for a similar type of job, a certain amount, then the person doing that same job needs to be paid the same rate.
So WIOA requires Voc Rehab agencies to reserve not less than 15% of the federal VR allotment to provide pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities transitioning from school to post-secondary education programs and employment in competitive integrated settings. It also states that we are to coordinate these services with the local education agencies. Okay. Transition services and vocational rehabilitation services. WIOA requires VR agencies to provide the service for students and youth who have been determined eligible for VR services. These services could be transition services that facilitate the transition from school to post-secondary life, the adult world of work or college training, to reach the goal of an employment outcome in a competitive integrated employment setting. Other services are vocational rehabilitation services that are available to all eligible individuals. And we'll go in more detail on this later on in the presentation. So our three agencies have a longstanding working relationship prior to WIOA requiring VR agencies and state education agencies to enter into a formal agreement. So WIOA formalized our partnership, but we have had a long-standing relationship working together to provide services for our youth and students as they transition out of school into their next role in life, work, employment, training, college. All right, so according to WIOA, students with disabilities in New Jersey includes, this is going to be the definition that we use. So all students ages 14 to 21 who are eligible for special education and related services under IDEA, who may be receiving accommodations under a 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, or who have a medically documented disability that presents a barrier to employment. Students can be enrolled in a variety of education settings, middle school or high school, non-traditional or alternative programs, approved private schools for students with disabilities, homeschooling, post-secondary programs, and juvenile justice facilities, as long as they meet the definition above between those ages and having one of those documented disabilities. Out-of-school youth services, out-of-school youth employment services. These are for youth age 16 to 24 who are out of school and at risk. They can also have access to out-of-school youth employment services, or OSYES, to get back on the path of self-sufficiency. This could include job exploration counseling, workplace readiness skills, developing self-advocacy skills, exploring and developing career pathways. So all of the same types of services we would do with our in-school youth, we can also do with our out-of-school youth between the ages of 16 to 24. And there's more information on that link right there to our website.
So hopefully everybody knows this at this point, because back in 2012, the governor of New Jersey signed a declaration that New Jersey is an employment first state. And what that means is that as a state, we are promoting the idea that competitive employment in the general workforce is the first priority and preferred outcome for all people with disabilities. And very fortunately, this initiative of employment first is very consistent with all the priorities of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So we're in concert with this new federal law, and we are all striving for competitive integrated employment for all people with disabilities. All right, so now we're going to talk about the 5 pre-employment transition services. So the 5 services that are required to be offered to all students with disabilities, age 14 to 21, include job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on opportunities for enrollment in post-secondary education programs, including comprehensive transition programs, workplace readiness training, and instruction in self-advocacy. So the first service, job exploration counseling, is pretty self-explanatory. As you can imagine, young people as young as age 14 really need to explore the world of work. They need to see what are the options out there. They need to get a better sense of what are the possible routes that they could pursue in their career. So whether it's on an individual or group basis, in a classroom or out in the community, this kind of counseling can happen to help kids sort of learn more about what are the in-demand industry sectors, what are the some non-traditional employment options, you know, that maybe they haven't been exposed to before. This could include using some vocational interest inventories and helping students understand the results of those inventories, identifying career pathways that might be helpful for students and would be interesting to them, as well as just local market information, local labor market information. so that students could understand how many jobs are there in the field that they're interested in. Work-based learning experiences. So there is really no way to replicate actually hands-on experience for understanding what a particular job is like and whether you like it or not. And so we highly recommend and encourage students to have work-based learning experiences as soon as they can and for multiple times throughout their high school career so that they can gain that valuable hands-on experience. And so these can occur in school, after school, they can be paid, they can be unpaid, they can be volunteer. We encourage that these occur in the community to the maximum extent possible. There really isn't any way to replicate what's going on in the community in a school building. So community-based is always best for this kind of activity. You've heard of internships, maybe job sampling opportunities, on-the-job training, mentoring opportunities. These are all things that can happen in the community. And it does include things like worksite tours and job shadowing. So even younger kids could participate. Maybe if it isn't so much hands-on, but they could still observe and see what's out there. Counseling on enrollment, opportunities for enrollment in post-secondary education programs. So again, on either an individual or group basis, we're helping students to learn about possibilities for enrolling or remaining enrolled in post-secondary education or training programs, helping them understand how to enter into these post-secondary education programs. Just what are the options for different programs around, including, as I said, comprehensive transition programs. One comes to mind at the College of New Jersey, for example. They have a comprehensive transition program for individuals coming out of high school to learn about different things on a college campus. It's to help students understand how their career goals line up with post-secondary education and training. We'll help them complete steps for actually enrolling in these programs and how to apply for post-secondary financial aid options. And we'll also discuss the various supports and assistive technology that are used by students with disabilities on a college campus under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We'll learn about information on course offerings, career options, and types of training needed to succeed in the workplace and help students make decisions about changing majors and/or their education and training programs. Fourth service is workplace readiness training. And again, this can be done on an individual or group basis. It helps students learn the soft skills, the social skills, independent living skills necessary for anyone to be successful in employment. You can't underestimate the importance of communication and interpersonal skills. This is often seen as the #1 reason why people with disabilities don't succeed in employment is lack of interpersonal or social skills. So it's important that we focus on getting everyone ready for this interactive environment, which is typical of workplaces. Things like financial literacy, just dealing with paychecks and taxes and all that good stuff, as well as just job seeking skills. How do you first get your foot in the door? And then perhaps maybe my favorite, instruction in self-advocacy. So we're, again, on an individual group basis in a classroom or community setting, we're talking about helping kids learn about their own disability, What does it mean for them? What's the impact? Their rights and responsibilities, so that they can understand how to request accommodations appropriately, how to request the services and supports they need, how to utilize mentors. Peer mentoring is huge, and they can get support from school staff and others at work sites and other organizations. Self-advocacy is hugely important for our students.
Also, under self-advocacy, we have our centers for independent living. There are 12 centers that service all 21 counties across the state. The centers are the experts in teaching self-advocacy. The centers for independent living help people understand what resources are available to them based on their individual needs, and they assist them with accessing these resources independently. It's a great stepping stone to and resource to have for the young adults as they continue to learn to be more self-sufficient and transition out of the school system into the adult world.
You want to cover this, Toni?
Yes. So if a student with a disability requires any auxiliary aid or service to participate and complete any of the pre-employment transition services, DVR and CBVI must pay for the cost of these services. Some of these aids could be ASL interpreters, CART services, any assistive technology devices, speech devices, screen readers, any items like that, in order to have the student have full access to the pre-employment transition services.
Yeah, and so DVRS and CBVI must pay for these things if no other public entity is required to provide them. All right, so as we talked about, the referral process to obtain pre-employment transition services includes these categories of students with disabilities: students in special ed, students receiving 504 services, and other students who just have a documented disability. They're all considered potentially eligible, and that's a really key phrase there, potentially eligible for vocational rehabilitation, according to the federal law WIOA, as long as they're considering the goal of competitive integrated employment. So the key here is that if they're considering the goal, they may not be sure that they want competitive integrated employment just yet, but they're considering that. It's an idea that they're willing to pursue. As long as they have one of those three categories up above there, special ed, 504, or just a documented disability, they're considered potentially eligible for vocational rehabilitation. And therefore, to receive pre-employment transition services, they do not need to apply to or be determined eligible for these agencies. That's huge. They're not needing to apply for eligibility. They just need to be referred for pre-employment transition services. Students who are blind or visually impaired or deafblind can also receive pre-employment transition services. They would be referred to the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And therefore, they should not be also referred to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, since this would be unnecessary and just a duplication of services and efforts and a waste. So that population very specifically is appropriately served by the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
Services for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. DVR has counselors called Deaf Language Specialists, or a DLS, for students who are deaf and hard of hearing and utilize American Sign Language as their primary mode of communication. DVR has a contract with 3 regional career centers, or RCC, in the north, central, and southern parts of the state. They provide the following services. For students and youth, all of the 5 core pre-employment transition services and the out-of-school youth employment services. For adults, they offer job readiness training, assistive technology demonstrations, vocational assessments, job placement, and job coaching. One of the other main things that I always utilized when working in the field was the employer education. So teaching and educating employers about working with individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, and assistive technology that they may be able to purchase to assist the employee in completing their job tasks to their full ability.
So
Oh, go ahead, Bill, I'm sorry.
Okay, so to refer a student for pre-employment transition services, for the vast majority of students, they're going to be referred to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. And so if you go online to this link here on their website, you can access the Pre-ETS or Pre-Employment Transition Services student referral form. And it's interesting that this form is on their website. If you access it through the Internet Explorer browser, you will be able to have the signatures be done electronically. Unfortunately, that feature does not work with other browsers at the current time. It's something being worked on, I understand. But at this point, you can access that referral form. And I think we're going to make it available as a handout. We will get it to the organizers for this event and get that form up for you guys. Again, as Toni mentioned, if you're an individual who is deaf or hard of hearing, there's a checkbox for referral to RCC or Regional Career Center for individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing. For anyone whose primary disability is blindness, deaf blindness, or visually impaired, then they would be referred to the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired by their teacher of the blind or visually impaired, or by contacting a regional CBVI office, which is listed on this website link. Now, as you can imagine, it's really important that schools work closely with these agencies to coordinate the process, because many of these pre-employment transition services that we talked about are things that schools can be already doing or have done. And so we want to make sure that there's no duplication of unnecessary duplication or waste of services. We want to make sure that if we're referring a student to one of these agencies, it's because the student continues to have a need for that service, and the service is not expected to be received from the school. So IEP teams working collaboratively with these local agency offices need to make sure that this is a coordinated process. As we said, we don't want to replicate, we don't want to duplicate anything. The pre-employment transition services are to supplement and complement transition services provided by the school. So our recommendation is, on at least an annual basis, IEP teams should determine the following for each student with disabilities. Which pre-ETS has the student already received from either the school or one of these agencies, DVR, CBVI? Which pre-ETS, if any, does the student continue to need? And if the student needs pre-ETS, who will be responsible for providing these services? The school or DVRS, CBVI? To help you answer these questions about who's going to be providing, we're offering the following criteria to use when figuring out responsibility. So the first criteria is the purpose of the service. Is it related more to an employment outcome or an education outcome? That is the service usually considered special education or related service, such as transition planning necessary for the provision of a free appropriate public education? Customary services, is the service one that the school customarily provides under Part B of the IDEA? For example, if the school ordinarily provides job exploration counseling or work-based experiences, learning experiences to its eligible students with disabilities, the fact that those services are now authorized under WIOA as pre-employment transition services does not mean that the school should stop providing them and refer those students to the VR program. However, if summer work experiences are not customarily provided by a school, DVRS or CBVI and the school may collaboratively work together to coordinate and provide summer work-based learning experiences. And finally, eligibility. So students with disabilities who receive accommodations under Section 504 are not necessarily eligible for receiving special education and related services, including the transition services under IDEA. So these students can receive needed pre-ETS from DVRS and CBVI.
Okay, so vocational rehabilitation and vocational rehabilitation transition services. Vocational rehabilitation services are to assist individuals to prepare for and exceed in a job or to participate in pre-employment transition services. Some students with disabilities may need other vocational rehabilitation services not included in the 5 required pre-employment transition services. If other VR services are needed, school staff and families should assist students aged 14 to 21 to apply for eligibility with DVR or CBVI. If a student is determined eligible, they can receive the needed vocational rehab services, transition services, and pre-employment transition services while still in school, and then the needed vocational rehabilitation services as an adult after finishing high school. This is probably the biggest change in VR's relationship with schools. It's a huge culture shift within our agency to shift from just adult services being our focus to now adult and youth services. Who pays for vocational rehabilitation services? DVR and CBVI will look at the income of eligible individuals and their parents if under the age of 22 to determine if they will be required to share the cost of some VR services. These are called cost services. Other no-cost VR services are fully funded by the public agency, either DVR or CBVI, regardless of the income of eligible individuals and their parents if under the age of 22. So again, this is for vocational rehab services. This is not for the pre-employment transition services. Cost services, so some examples could be college or training, physical or mental restoration, assistive technology devices. I'd like to think of cost services are anything that you could purchase without having to come through a VR agency. So you can go to college without having to come through VR. You can get assistive technology. You could get a vehicle modification or hearing aids. Any of these types of things you can get without coming through VR. So think of those as cost services. No cost services, again, are things that you can only access by coming through a VR agency. They could be diagnostic evaluations, which are maybe vocational evaluations, psychological evaluations to determine eligibility, vocational evaluations to determine one's level of independence on a job site, their work skills, the amount of support they might need to learn a job or training materials, supported employment services, which could be job coaching to help an individual on an employment site to learn those job tasks, develop skills to and techniques to complete those job tasks as independently as possible. Time limited placement and coaching. So this could be assistance with completing job applications, interviewing skills, job placement, and then job coaching services to quickly learn those job tasks as the coach fades out. Accommodations on the job site. So if someone might need an alternate work schedule, or someone with a physical disability, if they maybe need a stool, if they're standing for majority of their day. So assisting with obtaining any type of job accommodations, and then skills training. So any types of training to develop their skills to, again, obtain and maintain employment. Transition services are for students who have been determined eligible for DVR or CBVI. They can also receive the needed transition services from our agencies. These could be individual or group services needed to assist students with the continued development of their post-secondary employment options. So again, figuring out their goals as they transition out of school into the adult world of either work or college or a training program. Transition services provided by DVR and CBVI supplement and do not replace the transition services provided by a school district. Some of DVR and CBVI's transition services could include diagnostic evaluations and assessments. Again, they could be work evaluations or evaluations to determine eligibility for services. Counseling and guidance services, that's the core of what all of our vocational rehabilitation counselors do, providing that counseling and guidance to assist an individual with figuring out their employment goals and all other services that they might need for their vocational rehabilitation. Job placement assistance, supported employment services under that umbrella, again, is our job coaching and time limited and intensive job coaching, as well as the long-term follow-along services. Project Search is another specialized program that we offer, and that is only for individuals registered with DVRS at this time.
Yeah, and I've heard recently that DVRS has added several different Project Search sites. So it's a growing opportunity throughout the state, which is really great.
Yes, in the southern part of the state, we have 2 sites in Burlington County and Camden County. And up north, I know they just added another one. I want to say they're at like 9 or 10 up in North Jersey at this point, different sites for Project Search. If you have any specific questions about Project Search, if you want to leave your email in the Q&A, I can have the state coordinators under DVR reach out to provide additional information. But basically, Project Search is a 1-year internship in a live business, and they rotate between 3 different internship sites within that particular business. Could be at a hospital, a corporate business, a college campus, and they are fully immersed in that work environment. And it's actually it's a national and actually international project that they have, and there's a lot of information if you just go to projectsearch.us.
Yeah, one of the features of the Project Search model, which I find very interesting, is that they focus very much on systematic instruction. Mm-hmm. So it's not just sending kids into places and sink or swim. You know, they're focusing, using task analysis, using systematic prompting. So I think it's a really great model for training.
Okay, referral for transition services and other voc rehab services. Students with disabilities can be referred to DVR for an eligibility determination by completing the online referral. Students who are blind, deafblind, or visually impaired and already receiving Pre-ETS from CBVI can request an application for VR and transition services from the student's CBVI transition counselor.
All right, so the role of school staff is certainly to help students with this referral process to receive the needed services from these agencies, whether it's a referral for pre-employment transition services or a referral for eligibility so that they could then receive transition services and vocational rehabilitation services while they're a student. So IEP teams really are required to consider the need for consultation and technical assistance from these agencies and other agencies that provide services for individuals with disabilities. This must occur annually for students turning age 14 and older. So this is just a part of what IEP teams need to do each year, is consider the need for this information or advice coming from these other agencies. And when requested, staff from these other agencies can share their expertise with the IEP team members, and it can be on a broad range of topics that are related to preparing students for competitive integrated employment. The Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired has a relatively small population of people that they serve. And so they offer individualized consultation and technical assistance from our own Amanda Gerson, who's not with us today, but Amanda Gerson would be the one to provide that individualized consultation regarding vocational rehabilitation and transition services.
Okay, so transition counselors. Each local DVR office has a lead transition counselor to work with the school districts within that county. So DVR breaks up the offices based on county. CBVI also does. We specifically have 18 offices under DVR. CBVI has a lot less, but they service every county just like VR does. Your county's DVR lead transition counselor is your primary contact person for providing any consultation and technical assistance, as well as assisting with the referral of students for services while in school and after graduation from high school. Within DVR, the way it works within each county is that every single school, whether it's in district, county vocational school, private schools for students with disabilities, every school is assigned to one of the regular vocational rehab counselors within the office, but then each office also has a lead transition counselor who, again, is going to be your primary contact for connecting you. If you do not know who your lead transition counselor is within your county, you can reach out to the local office and just ask for that lead transition counselor, or even say what school you are from, and they can connect you with that voc rehab counselor who is assigned your school. One of the resources that we provided for the conference today is our brochure that has all of the offices and their contact information listed on the back. If you are unable to get in contact with your office, you can always reach out to myself. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation, and I can connect you with whoever that lead transition counselor is within your office. And CBVI assigns a transition counselor to each student aged 14 through 24 who is blind, deafblind, or visually impaired and known to their agency. So CBVI actually assigns directly to the student, whereas VR, we assign directly to the school, and then once a case is open, you're assigned to a counselor. Okay, so developing and using a protocol for the delivery of services. So your school will work with the VR agencies to develop and use a protocol that outlines the services that are provided and who does what and when they do them. This could be, who makes the referral, who requests to attend an IEP meeting, who provides documentation, who comes out to present, all of these items. Your school will work with the VR agency to kind of develop a seamless process.
Okay, so if there is an anticipation on the part of either one of these agencies, DVRS or CBVI, that they will not have sufficient funding to serve all their eligible and potentially eligible clients within a particular year, then they may have to institute what is called an order of selection. And that is essentially a waiting list, because what it does is it forces the agency to categorize individuals by their level of disabilities. And so individuals having the most significant disabilities are given priority for receiving services, and other individuals may need to wait to receive services until funding becomes available. So this is an unfortunate situation if it should occur, but we offer this information just so you know if it happens, that it's all about potentially not having enough money to serve everyone. All right, so we're going to talk about limitations on the use of subminimum wage. So what is subminimum wage? I thought minimum wage was what we all heard about. Well, subminimum wage is a provision in the Fair Labor Standards Act under Section 14C that allows employers, after they receive a certificate from the U.S. Department of Labor, to pay special minimum wages less than the federal minimum wage, which is currently $7.25 per hour. And this is only for workers who have disabilities, and it's for the work being performed. You may have heard the term sheltered workshops. These are the employers that we're talking about here. These employers must measure the production rate of each employee with disabilities in comparison to the typical production rate of employees without disabilities to determine wages for employees with disabilities. So for example, if employees without disabilities can assemble 100 items per hour, which is the typical production rate, and earn $12 per hour, Mary, an employee with disabilities, can assemble 25 items per hour, or 25% of the typical production rate. So her wages would be $3 per hour, or $12 times 0.25 equals $3. Now, as you can imagine, we've been talking about competitive integrated employment. That's the goal of this federal WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. The goal is to increase the number of students who achieve competitive integrated employment. And despite our best efforts to prepare students for this outcome, some individuals may choose to pursue work at subminimum wages in segregated settings. So we are asking schools to share the following information with any student and family when a student chooses to pursue work at subminimum wages. This federal law, WIOA, prohibits schools from contracting with businesses that pay workers subminimum wage, such as sheltered workshops, so that students can participate in work at subminimum wages, including no wages. After exiting high school, DVRS and CBVI may only refer individuals aged 24 and under for subminimum wage employment if the following has happened. The 5 core pre-ETS that we talked about are offered and provided to the individual, or they had transition services under IDEA as documented in their IEP. They applied for VR services with the result that the individual was determined ineligible for VR services, or they applied and were determined eligible for VR services, and the following all below: had an approved IPE, which stands for Individualized Plan for Employment, that included a specific employment goal consistent with competitive integrated employment. The individual was unable to achieve an employment outcome consistent with competitive integrated employment, despite working towards this outcome with reasonable accommodations and appropriate supports and services, including supported employment services and customized employment services for a reasonable period of time. And the individual's case was closed. And these agencies provided career counseling and information and referral services to federal and state programs and other resources that offer employment-related services and supports designed to enable the individual to explore, discover, experience, and attain competitive integrated employment. And the counseling and information and referrals were not for employment at subminimum wage. When a student chooses to pursue work at subminimum wages, schools are responsible for the following. They must provide DVRS or CBVI with documentation that the student has received transition services under the IDEA, and provide this documentation in a manner that complies with confidentiality requirements of the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, and the IDEA. And the documentation must contain, at a minimum, all the following: youth's name, description of service, so on. Everything listed on this slide, I give it to you as a reference. This is what's in the law as what must be contained. In the event a youth with disabilities or the youth's parent or guardian refuses through informed choice to participate in the activities required by this Section 511 of WIOA, such documentation must at a minimum contain all the following: description of the refusal and the reason for such refusal, so on. Everything listed here for your reference again.
Okay, pre-employment transition services, and vocational rehabilitation services. Representatives of DVR, CBVI, and DOE meet monthly to plan and coordinate promotional activities. So myself, Amanda, and Bill, we meet quite frequently to collaborate and develop presentations, such as the one we're doing right now, develop tools and resources for schools, students, and parents, and continue to work together, as I mentioned earlier, having that long-standing relationship.
I'm sorry, this is our 2-minute warning that we will be ending shortly.
Okay, so that's
Perfect.
good timing. We're on our last slide. So you have our contact information. That's my email address, Tony's email, and Amanda's email. Feel free to send us any questions you have. If you need help accessing pre-employment transition services, accessing transition services and VR services from these agencies, send us an email. We can help troubleshoot and make it happen for your kids. So
unfortunately,
thank you so
we've run
much.
out of time in terms of our question and answer session. Thank you so much, Tony Scott, for answering so many of the questions that we had in the question and answer section. We hope you guys really enjoy the presentation, and we thank you again for participating. Very big thank you to Bill Freeman and Tony Scott for this presentation. Please be sure to check out the rest of the New Jersey Youth Transition Conference. Additional workshops and information can be found on www.njyouth.transition.life. Additional resource information and our virtual resource guide can be found in our vendor village, also located in the website. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And again, thank you so much to our presenters, Mr. Bill Freeman and Ms. Toni Scott.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.